Hey, beautiful people, beautiful people. What is good? What is good? What is good? Of course, you know who I be. Good Doc, Dr. Mike TV. Back again, once again. You should already know, ladies and gentlemen. Informational video coming your way. Shout out to the IPA, International Passport Association and affiliates. All my good stuff linked in the description area below and below this video. All right. So recently, I have been asked a very common question by the audience at large, and I kind of felt there was no better moment than the present to discuss it, right? And I think that every time I've made a video about this, sometimes my numbers have changed, but I try to make it as consistent as humanly possible. But since the pandemic and all of the things that have changed in the world, inflation and all of that stuff, I do believe it warrants another video. So a lot of guys have been asking me, yo, Doc, man, how much money should I bring on my foreign trip abroad? Like, what is a solid number? Give me a definitive number for myself so that I know how much money I need to satisfactorily enjoy my stay in any country that I am in, right? Now, I can speak more so for the Philippines. I think that these numbers can easily translate into other Southeast Asian countries as well as in, Central America, South America areas as well. I do believe these numbers could, or this rule of thumb, I should say, could be beneficial in any of the countries that you choose to go to. Now, specifically about the Philippines, guys, you do know that the exchange rate is highly favorable to the dollar, right? At this moment, the exchange rate is highly favorable to the dollar. What does that mean, ladies and gentlemen? That means that for every $1 you spend, you're going to get a lot of the currency in that country, at least more so than it was within the prior year. I think we're still at around 58 pesos to the dollar to date, in and around that area, 57, 58, maybe even more to the dollar, which means you'll have more currency to your name to spend in that country. So it's like this. Whenever I travel, or for my first-time travelers, the way that I like to look at it is simple. Think about a number that, let me stop. Not that one. Not that rule of thumb. See, I'm getting my videos fucked up. All right. First of all, let's start with how long you plan to stay, right? If you're there for a week, it's a little bit easier. If you're there for a month, there for 3 months, then it starts to get into the budgeting and the planning of it all, right? If you're there for 30 days or less, man, I would say for every day that you're in the Philippines, just have $100 to your name. Now that sounds crazy. They be, Doc, what are you talking about, bro? What are you talking about? Why do I need $100 to my name for every day that I'm in the country, more specifically to a place like the Philippines? I do believe that if you're out there tricking out more than $100 a day, you doing the most. But it gives you a buffer of sorts, right? In my personal opinion, it gives you a buffer. So let's say, for example, you stay for 30 days, $100, looking at what? $3,000, right? $3,000. It's not a bad chunk of change, about $3,000 a month. That seems fair. Now, when you start to get into the activities that you enjoy, maybe that will require you to have additional funds needed, right? So it's always pertinent to have access to cash. Whether you have a friend that can send you money at the drop of a dime if you need it, whether you can send Western Unions or any type of funds to yourself whenever you need it, that's always something you have to have access to. So aside from you having the access, just as a hypothetical number, $100 US per day for you to spend on yourself to have your fun, you also have to be able to have access to additional funds should you need additional funds, right? So for me, I would say $3,000 to bring with you. I know that's a crazy number, and we're speaking specifically about the Philippines, but it's a safe number. I think $3,000 is a safe number, right? Because you got a lot of guys out there, myself included, that have preached the idea of you being able to live, with far less than the $3,000 that I'm proposing to you guys. But in reality, first timers aren't going to know that. You're not going to know that until you've been in the country. You're not going to know that until you adjust accordingly, until you're like, okay, now I know these are the activities that I like. These are the activities that I don't like. These are the places I like to go. These are the places I don't like to go. So as a result, let me budget my way accordingly of the things that I actually like to do. And that may take a trip or two, right? So the first time, it's always better to over-prepare than under-prepare. Always better to have more than you need. It's always better to have and not need than to need and not have. Best philosophy that anybody's ever told me in my entire life. Always good to have it and not need it, rather than need it and not have it. That came to fruition more so when it comes to insurances. I hope that you guys will invest in travel insurances as well. Not going to really go into that because that's also a video for another day, but to have travel insurance needed to make sure your tickets are covered and stuff like that, I think that that's also something you should think about getting into. But in reality, as far as the money budget for the activities, your stay and all of that stuff, $100 a day plus access to additional funds if needed. Right? A lot of people like to bring credit cards. A lot of people like to have their debit card with them because usually, unless your bank is super fickle, you can just use the ATMs over there. So that's what I'm talking about when it comes to additional funds. You know, you pull out as you need. Shouldn't be walking around with lump sums of cash, but you know, some people like to ball out till they fall out, so I'm not going to judge you on it. But it's always better to, like I said, have additional funds when needed. Right? And when I'm talking about the $100 a day, that should also include, to an extent, you know, where you're staying at, you know, your hotel or something like that. Sometimes people's hotels cost about $100 a day. So that might need to be something that you take care of in advance. You know, make sure that your stay is taken care of, and that shouldn't be included in your budget on a daily basis as well. I'm sorry. It just depends on how you look at it. That's always something to take into consideration, right? But for me, when I travel, for myself personally, I like to keep in mind when I'm making these videos about including the newbies, right? The new guys that are coming into the country, you know, the new guys that are just, you know, setting foot outside of the United States for the first time, and, you know, they tricking and going crazy and stuff. Let's be honest, because I know how a lot of guys are. You're tricking, you having the time of your life, you out here just going ham. I want to make sure you have enough money to enjoy that. And I think $100 a day, some people may say that's still not enough, but I think that's a good starting point. That's the way I want you to look at it. It's always a good starting point. About 100 a day, right? Because you don't know what you're going to like until you do it. You don't know what you're going to like until you like it or till you don't like it. Like, my boys told me to try this. I ain't fucking with it like that. So I ain't going to never do it again, right? But in those first couple of days or in those first times traveling to a country, you're going to need to get all that stuff out the way. And that's going to cost you, right? So that's why I say at a safe rate, $100 a day should cover you if you're doing a 30-day stint, right? Now, if you start to get into the longer stints, I would hope that you would adjust your budget accordingly, right? I know a lot of people who don't go to the country with budgets, but I'm a firm believer in just making sure that you have the necessities, right? All the other shit, you know, when you're having fun and stuff, that could be a Bootyloo account, something that you should set to the side. But as long as you can make sure that your standards are met, your food, your water, your shelter, and all of that stuff, I do believe as long as those needs are met, everything else is just a bonus and it's extra, right? And I do believe that would probably bring you up to about 100 a day. And like I said, if you're staying in the fancy Shangri-Las and your Boracais and all of that stuff, that number may need to be adjusted, right? And again, it's going to need an adjustment because you're staying in a place that is somewhat costly, or, you know, it could cost you additional funds for you to be able to stay in these higher, well, let me say, you're more, I don't even want to call it ritzy, richer areas, because that's not really true, because you can find good budget places to stay at, right, that would be fitting, you know, that would be suitable. But then again, if you can't find them and you want to stay at the best of the best of the best, even in the Philippines, is still going to bring you them dollars, right, or pesos for this particular video. So I want you to make sure you have enough, right? And if you start out with 100 a day, if that's where you start out, right, that's my starting point. Start out with 100 a day, and you realize this shit ain't enough, then you can up it, okay? I might need to do 150. Might need to do 200. Now, again, these numbers sound fucking crazy to me because that's not how I live when I'm in the Philippines, right? I'm a little different. But if you're starting to spend $200 a day, I do believe you might want to look at yourself and make the necessary adjustments, because 10,000 pesos on average, if you're doing every $1 to 50 pesos, on average, if you're spending about 10 grand in a day, damn, that sounds like a lot of money, right? If you got it, I can't say shit to you. But in reality, I do believe that that's just excessive to an extent, depending on who you are, to be spending that type of money. But again, I can't judge you if that's how you rock out. It is what it is, all right? But that's just me. That's just my thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not here to drag this video out very long. Just wanted to give you an idea of how you could prepare your budget accordingly, right? There's so many different rules and regulations that other people put into place when it comes to how they spend their money, right? And even though we are going through a stage of inflation and all of that shit, and the dollar is heavy for us in the Philippines, I do believe that sometimes, to an extent, depending on how you look at it, depending on where you're staying, depending on the foods you're eating, the places you're visiting, it may not be too far-fetched for you to be spending 100 or 200 a day. I know that sounds crazy for me to even say it, to part my lips to say that shit. It's just bugging. But, you know, myself personally, having not been there during this particular time, and like I said, I know I'd have to adjust like everybody else, but my newbies, not knowing how things work, not knowing how things spin, you know, it may be not a bad idea for you to up it if you need to. Start with 100, see how that plays out, see how comfortable you are. If you have the funds to do it, which you should never travel without. You know, if you need to up it to $150, 150, 200, I'm not going to be mad at you for doing it, but that should not be your standard of every single day that you live in the Philippines. And you'll realize that when you're there. I'm just trying to keep the mindset of my new guys coming to the Philippines about how much you would need. My veterans, my OGs, the guys who've been there, done that, y'all already know what numbers you're going to be using. So this video does not necessarily apply to you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, if you love this video, please feel free to share, like, comment, and subscribe. Appreciate you locking into the good dot, man. Y'all know what time it is, man. Time for me to go and get to getting. Y'all take care, man. Y'all stay blessed, man. Doc is out. Peace.